that I could relate to, things that I thought, you know, my friends would want to hear, and things that
Some of country music's biggest stars carried secrets that followed them through decades of fame, only to be revealed when time had nearly run out. Long after the glory days had passed, shocking confessions of forbidden love and secret affairs began to surface. These were not casual stories. They were revelations that shattered the clean image fans thought they knew, each pulling back the curtain on a life filled with passion, risk, and betrayal. Join us as delve into the details of these 20 country music artists who proved that the truth can stay buried for years. Number 1. Charley Pride. Charley Pride lived much of his life focused on music, but a personal story emerged years later that forced hard questions into the open. He had a relationship with a flight attendant decades earlier. From that relationship, a son was born. The details stayed private while Pride built a career as a top country singer. Eventually, the matter reached a Texas court. DNA testing showed Pride was the boy's father. The court ordered the child's name changed to carry the Pride surname. That legal decision made the story public in an official way. Reporters found court records and wrote about the ruling. Fans who had once only known Pride for his music read about his family life and the court fight. Pride had not publicly discussed the child in earlier years. However, the DNA result became the clear proof. He faced questions from fans and the press, but he chose not to dwell on the circumstances. Instead, he quietly provided support, showing that the secret had been real. For many, it was surprising because Pride had carried himself with dignity and discipline. Yet fame and constant travel created pressures even he could not resist. The exposure of his affair came slowly, pieced together over time, until it became part of his story, showing that behind his groundbreaking career, there were personal choices that revealed a more complicated man. The legal filings and records turned a private past into part of his public history. Reporters returned to the records as they traced facts about his family. Number 2. Sara Evans. Sara Evans had a private life that became public during a painful divorce. She filed for divorce in 2006 and accused her husband, Craig Shelsky, of adultery. It was a strong claim, and it named the family nanny as the person involved. The filing went into court records and then into news reports. Lawyers for the nanny denied wrongdoing and fought the claim. Sara's lawyers said they had photos that showed the nanny with the husband, and that claim increased attention. The nanny's attorneys pushed back and asked for the name to be removed from certain documents. Even her husband denied her claims, but Sara stepped away from the reality competition show Dancing with the Stars at the time, fueling speculation that personal chaos had overwhelmed her. A judge ordered changes to some paperwork during the case, yet reporters still followed the story closely. The conflict moved through legal steps, custody talks, and negotiations over money. Sara and her husband later agreed on child support and visitation, and those agreements became public records that outlets could report. The case also included a separate suit by the nanny, who later pursued a claim and reached a settlement. For fans, the controversy blurred Sara's public image for a long time. Though she rarely spoke about it afterward, the damage had already been done to her image. Fans who admired her music suddenly saw her caught in the kind of personal storm often reserved for tabloid figures. The affair revelations remained tied to her name, a reminder of how quickly private conflicts could become public when two people fought in court under the eyes of the media. Number 3. Jimmie Allen. Jimmie Allen's private life and career faced sharp public scrutiny in recent years after legal claims emerged. In 2023, a former manager sued him, and the complaint included serious allegations that drew wide attention in the music press. As journalists reported on the civil case, other statements and social media posts added to the public picture. In the middle of the legal storm, Allen issued a public apology to his wife and admitted to having an affair. In statements he made to the press, Allen acknowledged that he had been unfaithful and apologized for the pain he caused. Unlike some stars whose affairs surfaced only through rumor, Allen himself confirmed the truth. His cheating became a central point of the collapse of his marriage, with Alexis filing for divorce shortly after the admissions. Fans watched as the story unfolded across social media and news outlets, painting a picture of a rising star who had made destructive choices. Industry insiders expressed shock, as Allen had built an image of being grounded and family-oriented. The exposure of his affair was swift and direct, leaving little room for speculation. For Jimmie Allen, the revelation marked a turning point, showing how quickly fame could be overshadowed by personal mistakes. Number 4. Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson had a long life in the public eye, and many private stories followed him through the years. He had affairs outside his marriages, and one of those relationships led to a daughter named Paula. For a while, the child's existence stayed out of headlines while Willie built his career. The silence around the matter ended when his then-wife, Shirley Cawley, found a hospital bill for the baby. Seeing that bill made it clear there was more going on in Willie's private life than fans had known. The discovery ended the marriage, and Willie later admitted openly that he had fathered the child during the affair. Willie later admitted the relationship and told parts of the story himself, saying he was caught by the evidence. It was a moment that moved the whispers of infidelity into undeniable fact. Willie himself spoke candidly in interviews over the years, admitting that he had been unfaithful more than once. His charm and constant touring created situations where temptation was always close. Bandmates and friends recalled times when women followed him from town to town, and Willie rarely denied that he enjoyed the attention. His honesty about his wandering ways made the revelations less shocking. Still, the details stirred headlines. Unlike many stars who tried to keep such matters hidden, Willie often laughed about his mistakes, though the damage to his relationships was real. Number 5. Jason Aldean. Jason Aldean's personal life made headlines in 2012 when photos surfaced showing him in a Los Angeles bar with Brittany Kerr, a former cheerleader and reality show contestant. At the time, Aldean was married to his high school sweetheart, Jessica Ussery. The photos showed him kissing Kerr, and the images quickly spread online. Reporters wrote about the scandal, dissecting the issue from all sides. At that point, Aldean had no choice but to make a public statement admitting that he had acted in the wrong way. He explained that he had too much to drink that night, but the pictures spoke louder than words. Ussery at first tried to stand by him, but things couldn't work any longer. Within months, the marriage ended, and divorce papers followed. Aldean's career carried on, but fans followed the details as gossip sites and magazines published updates. Later, he began a serious relationship with Brittany Kerr, and eventually they married, which kept the story alive in the media. The scandal became one of the most talked about cheating incidents in country music of that period. Years later, interviews and profiles still mention how the photos revealed the truth about his personal choices and shifted the public's view of his life away from the perfect family man image. Number 6. LeAnn Rimes. LeAnn Rimes faced a storm in 2009 when news broke about her affair with actor Eddie Cibrian. At that time, she was married to Dean Sharramet, and Cibrian was married to Brandi Glanville. The affair started while Rimes and Cibrian were working together on a television movie, and gossip sites began giving hints. Soon, photographs of them together confirmed the rumors. Reporters shared images of the pair having dinner and spending time in private, and the news spread quickly. Rimes later admitted to the affair in interviews and said she fell in love with Cibrian despite being married. The scandal cost her much of the wholesome image she had carried since her teenage rise in country music. Her husband, Dean Sharramet, later filed for divorce, and Glanville also ended her marriage. The public breakup involved harsh comments from Glanville, which magazines published and fans followed. Rimes and Cibrian eventually married, which added another chapter to the story. Many readers remembered the drama because it played out across tabloids, television interviews, and online reports for months. The affair was not hidden for long. It was first revealed by photos and gossip outlets, and later Rimes herself spoke openly about the relationship. The scandal became one of the biggest celebrity love triangles of the 2000s in country music and beyond. Number 7. Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash's personal life became as famous as his music. During the 1950s and early 1960s, he was married to Vivian Liberto, but his long tours and substance addiction strained the marriage. Stories of his infidelity grew as he spent more time with June Carter, a singer from the Carter family. At first, rumors circulated quietly within the music industry, then gossip began to spread more widely. Eventually, Vivian couldn't hold it in anymore and confronted Cash about his closeness to June. The affair became impossible to hide as the two singers performed together and traveled constantly. Fans noticed the chemistry on stage, and the press started to pick up stories of their bond. Cash's marriage to Vivian ended in divorce in 1966, and he went on to build a life with June Carter, marrying her in 1968. Years later, in interviews and biographies, Cash and Carter both admitted the relationship had begun during a difficult period in his first marriage. The confession confirmed what many had suspected for years. The story became part of his legend, told in books, documentaries, and the film Walk the Line. The affair came out in a slow and explosive way. It showed how his private choices shaped the story of his life and career. Number 8. Conway Twitty. Conway Twitty lived a life surrounded by both fame and gossip. Known for his smooth love songs, he often faced speculation about his personal relationships. One of the most talked about was his close bond with fellow singer Loretta Lynn. They recorded many duets together, and their chemistry on stage fueled rumors of something more. While neither ever gave a full public admission, stories about Twitty's affairs circulated in music circles and in the media space. Twitty's marriages had ups and downs, and press reports sometimes pointed at infidelity during tours. Over time, fans connected the dots between his powerful love songs and the whispers about his private life. Journalists later wrote about alleged affairs, using interviews with friends and colleagues who said Twitty had lived a complicated romantic life. Although details were not confirmed in court filings, the rumors became part of his reputation, especially after his demise in 1993. Fans and journalists looked back at his career and noted how many stories of love and heartbreak in his music mirrored his real experiences. The talk about Loretta Lynn and other women stayed alive in country history books and fan discussions. For Twitty, the stories of his affairs and the strong suspicion created by years of onstage partnership with Loretta reached deep into his career. Number 9. Merle Haggard. Merle Haggard carried the same wild streak in his private life that he put into his songs. By the time he reached the peak of his career in the 1970s, he had already been through several marriages. When he wed fellow singer Leona Williams, he was already living with temptations on the road. Long tours kept him away from home, and many nights ended with women who waited after the shows. Band members later recalled how Haggard would slip away, leaving no explanation behind. Friends who spent years with him spoke of constant attention from women and how Haggard gave in more than once. The affair stories grew stronger when his marriage broke apart. When he and Leona divorced, those close to the couple admitted that infidelity had played a role. Haggard himself spoke in later interviews about how he had not always been faithful and admitted that his restless ways had cost him love. Fans picked up the accounts, connecting his cheating with songs about regret and broken hearts. His life became tangled with the lyrics he wrote. Listeners who knew nothing of the details could still feel the weight of mistakes in his music. The stories about his affairs moved from rumor to record, appearing in profiles and books that tried to explain the man behind the legend, leaving readers with the image of a gifted singer who struggled with loyalty. Number 10. Hank Williams Sr. Hank Williams Sr. lived a brief, burning life where fame, drinking, and infidelity mixed together. His marriage to Audrey Shepherd began with hope, but as his star rose, the troubles mounted. Hank had a charm that drew women, and on the road he often embraced it. Audrey heard the rumors and confronted him many times, and fights filled their home. Their troubled marriage was marked by his disloyalty, and whispers turned into facts she could no longer ignore. One of the most known affairs was with Bobby Jett, who later gave birth to a daughter 5 days after Hank passed away. At the time, few knew of the connection, but later records and DNA testing confirmed it. The truth about Bobby Jett and the child became part of Hank's story long after his passing. When the child grew, she spent years fighting in court to be recognized as Hank Williams' daughter and heir, eventually succeeding in the 1980s. Friends described how Hank could not stay faithful, even as his health fell apart from alcohol and illegal substances. His infidelity tore at his marriage, and those around him saw the damage every day. The affairs were not written in newspapers during his short life, but they lived in the memories of family and came out later through court filings and reports that traced every corner of his story. Number 11. George Jones. George Jones was known for his unmatched voice, but behind the songs was a man whose private life was constantly unsteady. His marriage to Tammy Wynette was fiery, full of love and conflict, and both partners knew about betrayal. George drank heavily, and drinking led him into affairs during tours. He would vanish after concerts, gone for nights, and Tammy would be left with suspicions that grew into certainty. The rumors spread quickly through Nashville, and by the time his marriage crumbled, the truth was out. Even beyond Tammy, George was linked to other women, and his cheating became part of the stories told by those who worked with him. His reputation as a brilliant singer was matched by a reputation for reckless choices. He could not separate his wild nights from his relationships, and everyone around him knew it. Tammy sang of heartbreak, and listeners knew those songs came from a real place. The tales of George's affairs lived on long after the marriages ended, passed down through stories told by bandmates, ex-wives, and industry friends who remembered how fame and temptation constantly pulled him away from home. Number 12. Glen Campbell. Glen Campbell rose from small-town Arkansas roots to become one of the most famous singers and guitarists of his era. Fame brought money, attention, and temptation, and Campbell often gave in. One of his most public relationships was with Tanya Tucker in the early 1980s, when he was ending one marriage and entering an affair that played out on magazine covers. The age difference and their fights made headlines, and fans followed every twist. The relationship was filled with passion, but also chaos, and their arguments often spilled into the press. At the same time, Campbell's history of affairs stretched further back. During his earlier marriages, stories circulated of his unfaithful behavior on tours. His private life was marked by a cycle of love, betrayal, and regret. The affair with Tanya Tucker made what had long been whispered into a very public story, and tabloids eagerly followed it. When their romance ended, Campbell married again, but the earlier scandals stayed in the background. It is well documented how his affairs tied into his struggles with illegal substances and drinking, showing how fame, desire, and weakness created a life as stormy as the songs he sang on stage. Number 13, Mindy McCready. Mindy McCready's career was marked by both success and controversy. Behind her voice and talent was a private life filled with relationships that drew public attention. One of the most shocking was her affair with baseball star Roger Clemens, which came to light years after it began. The connection reportedly started when Mindy was still a teenager, though she later said it grew serious when she was older. The truth did not surface until reporters uncovered it long after her career had already been troubled by personal struggles. The story spread quickly across news outlets, with questions about how long it had gone on and how hidden it had been. Mindy spoke about Clemens later, confirming that they had been together, though she resisted giving every detail. The relationship added another layer of scandal to a life already filled with battles over addiction and legal troubles. For fans, the affair showed how deeply complicated her world had become. It was not just her own confessions, but also investigations that revealed what had been kept secret. The timelines were later pieced together, showing how the affair influenced her reputation. Even as she tried to rebuild her career, the Clemens connection remained a story linked to her name, standing out as one of the most controversial revelations in the world of both country music and sports. Number 14, Randy Travis. Randy Travis was celebrated for his smooth voice and clean-cut image, but his personal life told a different story. His affair with Mary Davis, who later became his wife, changed everything. At the time, Randy was married to his manager, Elizabeth Hatcher. They had built his career together, creating an image of stability, but behind the scenes, his attention had shifted. The affair began with Randy and Mary growing close, and for a long while, it was kept hidden. When the truth came out, it shocked fans who had believed in his wholesome reputation. The exposure came during a stormy period when his marriage was collapsing and lawsuits followed. Court documents and interviews revealed details of the affair, making it clear that Randy had broken away from the woman who had guided his rise to fame. The story was not just about a personal choice, but about betrayal that altered his career path. His relationship with Mary became permanent, but the way it began left a lasting mark. Fans who once viewed him as the model of loyalty saw him differently. News stories later chronicled how the affair was part of a larger controversy, as Randy faced not only personal scandals, but also health and legal troubles. The revelation of his unfaithfulness reshaped his image and became an inseparable part of his history. Number 15, Kenny Rogers. Kenny Rogers built a career on heartfelt songs of love and loss, but his personal life was filled with 5 marriages and stories of infidelity. One of the most discussed affairs was with a woman who later admitted their relationship had been secret during his marriage. For years, Kenny himself was candid about his weaknesses, confessing in interviews that life on the road had led him astray. The constant touring, adoring fans, and lonely nights combined to create chances he did not resist. Rumors became fact when ex-wives and friends shared accounts of his cheating. Some details surfaced during divorces, when court filings and interviews laid bare the reasons for the breakdowns. Kenny acknowledged that his own had contributed, admitting that he had not always been faithful. Also, he later described how he struggled to balance fame with family, often losing the battle. The stories of affairs were not hidden by those close to him, and Kenny himself did not fully deny them. Instead, he explained them as part of a life lived under pressure, one where love and loyalty were often tested. These admissions gave depth to his music, where songs about heartbreak seemed to mirror his own experiences. The tales of his infidelity became part of his legacy, showing how even the most admired voices in country music carried flaws that shaped both their lives and their art. Number 16, Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis was as famous for scandal as for his music. His private life carried shock after shock, with multiple marriages, affairs, and controversies that never seemed to stop. Even early in his career, he destroyed his reputation by marrying his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown, while still married to another woman. That marriage began in secrecy, but when Lee was uncovered during his tour in England, it ruined his shows and sent his career into decline. Beyond that notorious marriage, Jerry Lee lived a life filled with affairs. Women surrounded him, and he never tried hard to hide his behavior. There were nights where he left with strangers, and ex-wives described how infidelity was constant. Divorce papers revealed accusations of cheating, making private betrayals part of the public record. The chaos of his relationships became legendary, with affairs mixing into fights, violent arguments, and sudden reconciliations. Jerry Lee lived a life where music and scandal were inseparable, and cheating was not an exception, but a pattern. Jerry Lee himself sometimes spoke of mistakes, though often without regret. The revelations of his affairs came from many directions: wives, journalists, court documents, and his own words. By the end of his life, that image was tied not only to his pounding piano style, but also to a personal story shaped by one shocking affair after another, leaving behind a reputation of turmoil. Number 17, Trace Adkins. Trace Adkins built a reputation as a towering figure with a deep voice and hit songs, but his private life carried struggles that often reached the headlines. His marriage to Rhonda Forlaw ended after decades of being married. They had been together for nearly 20 years, raising 3 daughters, but Trace's infidelity broke the foundation. Rumors of Trace's unfaithfulness had followed him for years, but the details came into the open when Rhonda filed for divorce. One of the affairs involved a woman he had met while performing, and the relationship went on in secret until it finally came to light. Friends close to Rhonda described her heartbreak, knowing that Trace had been unfaithful after years of loyalty. The divorce papers included adultery as a reason, leaving no doubt about the betrayal. Trace had also faced storms in his earlier marriages, where cheating had been suspected, making it a painful pattern in his personal life. The long separations, the constant attention from fans, and the lifestyle of a touring star all played their part. When the truth surfaced, Rhonda chose to walk away, taking their daughters with her. Trace carried on with his career, but his private world had changed forever. The affair showed how fame had cost him the stability he once promised, and it left behind memories of a marriage torn apart by unfaithfulness. Number 18, Keith Urban. Keith Urban found global success, but his early marriage to Nicole Kidman faced deep trouble. Just months after their wedding, Keith entered rehab for drinking and substance use. Behind the struggle with addiction, his difficulty in staying committed came to light. During nights of partying, he grew close to women who were drawn to his fame, and one of those connections turned into an affair. The relationship was discovered when Nicole found out about his late-night absences and hidden calls. The betrayal nearly ended their marriage in its first year. The affair was tied to his lifestyle at the time: wild nights, blurred judgment, and too much distance from his wife. Nicole stood by him, but only after Keith promised to change and seek help. Unfortunately, the damage left scars that took years to heal. For Keith, the memory of that affair remained tied to his early marriage, a reminder of how close he came to losing his partner. He chose to stay silent about the woman involved, but his actions confirmed what had happened. The experience marked a turning point in his life, pushing him toward recovery and showing how a single affair had nearly broken apart his new family. Number 19, Tammy Wynette. Tammy Wynette lived through marriages that mirrored the heartbreak in her songs. Her years with George Jones were filled with passion and fights, and both of them strayed. During their worst moments, Tammy grew close to other men, seeking comfort when her marriage felt broken. After her split from George, she was rumored to have spent time with Burt Reynolds, and many believed their relationship went further than friendship. The story followed her for years, especially since they were often seen together. Beyond that, Tammy's later marriages carried their own shadows of infidelity. At least one of her husbands accused her of cheating, pointing to sudden absences and unexplained calls. Those who went on tour with her also whispered about her private connections with musicians she traveled with. Her daughters later remembered how unstable her relationships could be, marked by jealousy, distance, and sudden breakups. Tammy rarely spoke about her affairs, but her actions left marks that could not be hidden. Those who knew her best saw a woman who often searched for love outside the vows she had made. Each discovery came through confrontations at home, fights with her husbands, or the collapse of another marriage. Her affairs became part of her complicated story, a life where loyalty was often broken and love turned into heartache. Number 20, Tanya Tucker. Tanya Tucker built her career as a young country star, but her personal life often made bigger headlines than her songs. When she entered a relationship with Glen Campbell in the early 1980s, it was not just a romance, but a very public affair. Campbell was older, still untangling himself from a marriage, while Tanya was in her 20s. Their passion burned bright and fast, and it played out in full view of reporters who followed every move. Tabloids seized on their age gap, the fights, and the scandals, turning the relationship into one of the most talked about stories in Nashville. The pair argued loudly, and those arguments often became news stories. Tanya later admitted that the intensity of their time together came with betrayals, as both had other connections outside the relationship. People close to them described a cycle of jealousy, suspicion, and unfaithfulness. Even after the romance collapsed, the story of Tanya and Glen remained one of country music's most dramatic chapters. Tanya's career carried on, but interviews continued to circle back to that period. The scandal showed how quickly private matters could explode under the spotlight when two famous names became entangled, leaving both remembered as much for their stormy relationship as for the music they created. What are your thoughts on how these affairs affect the lives and career of each of these country musicians? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.